All right, so we got the American Dream Podcast, episode 7, and we have the wonderful Lena Spotleson in the house today.
Hello,
how are you?
hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us. You have such a beautiful story. You've inspired so many people. You've inspired me. I've known about your story and I've looked into it for quite a bit now, but I really dug deep into it this week. And then yesterday I looked into it. And then today I was like, oh my God, I'm going to cry on this podcast. So just really, really amazing. But just to kind of get started, to introduce everybody to you, you used to be a basketball player.
Correct.
Now you're a basketball coach.
I have been a basketball coach for the last 19 years.
19 years.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know how the math adds up with your age, but that doesn't seem to make sense. But I'll take it. I'll take your word for it.
I'm a lot older than I look, I promise.
Well, we don't believe you, but that's okay. And then you're a cancer survivor as well.
I am. Stage 4 cancer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with that being said, you were told you had a 25% survival rate.
Yep.
Is that correct?
That's correct. I was diagnosed at the age of 26, and it was actually a month after I got married. I started to get stomach pain, and they couldn't really figure out what it was. I went to a bunch of different doctors. One even told me that women of my age are self-conscious about their bodies and tried to prescribe me antidepressants. So he actually sent me home with some antidepressants. I have never been depressed a day in my life and didn't really understand what was happening. But my husband and one of the doctors that I was working with kept pushing, and we had a bunch of scans, MRIs, CAT scans. I had an endoscopy, different blood tests. And in July of 2006, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. At the time, I didn't expect the doctor, the time that I went to the doctor's appointment, I didn't expect for the doctor to actually tell me anything. You know, I had gone through months and months and months of doctor's appointments, and the doctors kept saying they didn't know what it was. And, like I said, the one doctor telling me it was in my head.
Was that the same doctor that later diagnosed you?
No, different doctor. Yeah, I probably went to, I would say probably about 5 or 6 different doctors and had about 5 or 6 different procedures done.
Wow.
This particular day, I walked into Mayo Hospital. I was referred there by one of my other doctors, and he couldn't figure out what it was. So he had a friend at Mayo. He sent me over there, and they put me in contact with the head gynecological surgeon. And that surgeon walked in, and he looked at the scans and the test results. And my husband was sitting on the couch next to me, and I was sitting in the chair, where they give you the exams. And he walked in, sat down, looked at me, and he said, "You have cancer, and I'm going to show you why." So then he started pulling up like all my scans and showing me where the black masses were. He says, it's pretty bad. He goes, he didn't tell me the stage at the time, but he said it's pretty bad. It's here. And he was showing me it was on my uterus, my gallbladder, my appendix, my ovaries, the top part of my cervix, and then a bunch of lymph nodes down my left side. He goes, "We have to get you into surgery right away, and you won't be able to have children after this." So,
wow.
And I'm not an emotional person, but my husband, who is a very emotional person, I could see it. I looked right at him, and he was crying, which made me tear up. And I just scheduled my surgery. I remember walking out of there just being in shock and didn't know what to do or I had never heard of anybody in my family. Nobody in my family had cancer. Nobody I knew close to me even had cancer. So to say it was a shock was an understatement.
Wow. And this was, you said a month after you guys had gotten married, or now it's been a little bit longer?
So a month after we got married is when I started to get the stomach pain. So we got married in October of 2005, and then in November I started to get a stomach pain. And in July is when they finally diagnosed me.
Oh, goodness. So you guys were just freshly married, and you
Right.
were saying he was really excited about having kids, and then they break this news down to you.
Right.
When they came into that room, and you were very nonchalant just now, right? You're just like, "Oh, hey, you have cancer. Let me show you why." Was that what that conversation? I've always wondered what that conversation would be like.
That's exactly how he said it.
Wow.
Like, what do you imagine that you're a doctor, right? And you have to deliver this news to this 26-year-old young woman who they know, they have all my history there. They know that we're recently married. And it's the first time I met him. He just looks at me, and I could see the sadness in his eyes. it's probably got to be extremely difficult for a doctor to have to do that.
Wow.
Even if it was a 90-year-old, right? I'm sure it's difficult to deliver that news to anyone. But just having to deal with the emotions afterwards as well. I mean, he's a very, very nice man. He took very, very good care of me. In fact, the surgery, when he scheduled my surgery, he said it was going to be 3.5 hours. I went into surgery 2 weeks later, and what they do at Mayo that they don't do at any other, they weren't doing at any other hospital in 2006, was when they put you under and they open you up and then they start taking out what they think is cancer, or the tumors that are cancer. What they're able to do at Mayo is they're able to test other parts of your body while you're under.
Oh, so wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So typically when you go in and they look at your MRIs and they're like, okay, we got to take this spot out. We got to take this spot out. And then they go in and they take it out. They close you back up. They give you an MRI or they give you a CAT scan, and then they see if there's any other cancer there. Right. At Mayo, they were able to do that while I was under. So my surgery that was supposed to last 3.5 hours ended up lasting 6.5 hours.
Oh, wow.
And they kept testing.
You were asleep, right?
Yeah, I was out.
That must have been scary for your husband, though.
Correct. So my husband's in the waiting room. My mom's in the waiting room. Everybody's on standby. I have 3 sisters, and we're all super, super close. So they're all emotional, too. But I had no idea. In fact, I didn't know any of this was going on. After 6.5 hours, I started to wake up after the anesthesia. But to me, it felt like it was 3 hours. I didn't know any better. And I remember coming out of the anesthesia, and I can hear people talking, like nurses, and they were saying, it was longer than we thought it was going to be, so I knew something was wrong. And they didn't tell me anything until the very next day when I was like coming out. When you're under anesthesia, you're like sleeping on and off for the rest of the 24 hours. So the next day, a doctor came into the room, because at this point we didn't know it was stage 4. We thought it had spread from my uterus, the cervix, and maybe an ovary, and then come to find out, like I said, it was in all those other places. So they told me the next day. They came into my room and they said, okay, we have something to tell you. And I kept asking my family, I'm like, what's going on? I know something else is going on. And the oncologist goes, okay, we have something to tell you. We thought we'd be able to get most of this out with surgery, but you're going to have chemo and radiation, because it was spread pretty far.
Wow. In addition to everything you just went through.
Correct. Wow. So I remember, just the dumb, naive 26-year-old girl looking at the oncologist and going, will I lose my hair? It's the stupidest question ever, because yes, you're going to lose your hair, but how about your life? So.
Right. There's other major concerns. But I think that's normal too. Even for a guy,
right.
It's just, that's the thing that's associated with it publicly. So, that's not a surprise that's where your head went.
Right. It's the dumbest thing ever. So he said, yeah, you're gonna lose your hair. I was like, okay. But they had me walking probably a few days later, and I was a teacher at the time. I taught 4th grade.
A few days later after the surgery, right?
They had me up walking, and
okay.
yeah, and I was a teacher at the time, and I was nervous about like getting back into my classroom. Like, am I going to be able to go back and teach? When you're a teacher, you love those kids, you want to be back. It was the summertime at the time, but you're getting ready for school. School starts beginning of August, so I remember just being really sad and not being able to go into the classroom. So I had to take that time off. Chemo and radiation, they told me, was going to be very aggressive because I was stage 4 and because I was young. And without the most aggressive form of treatment, then I wouldn't live. And at this point in my head, I still thought I just had cancer and they just had to fix it. Like, I didn't know, I was very naive to the cancer world. I didn't know any of the stages meant anything. I didn't know I knew people died of cancer, but most of the time they were older people, right? Not young people. And I had no thought of me, which sounds so strange, but I had no thought that I wasn't going to make it through it.
Wow.
Myself
so
through it.
You just had your mind set on overcoming it.
Correct. Until when we went into the chemo and radiation meeting, because they have like this little meeting where they tell you what your treatment was going to be. Then he said, okay, you have a 25% chance of survival. And even then I was like, okay, the 75% of the people that didn't survive were probably 90.
Right.
Or, their time. So
Well, how did you have that mindset?
I
I mean,
have no
was
idea.
it just subconsciously you were just moving through it, or did you prep yourself mentally for this?
no,
Or
I was just, you're just so numb to all that's happening around you, right?
Right.
The good thing about Mayo is they schedule everything for you, right? So you don't have to have your mind in there and say, okay, I need to schedule my radiation. I need to schedule my chemo. I need to schedule my next doctor's appointment. They have it all set out for you. So you're just like following through the steps. And I just remember thinking, okay, if I could just get through these steps, then I'm going to be good.
right, because they set that expectation for you.
Right. And then
Okay.
when you're a kid and you think about doctors, you're like, okay, well, these doctors, they're super smart and they know what they're doing and they have this whole treatment protocol. And if I just do what they say I'm going to do, then I'm going to be okay. I didn't, and that was my whole mentality until chemo and radiation started.
So I want to backtrack a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Because you were talking about not being familiar with the stages, and I actually lost my grandpa to cancer. I lost my aunt to
I'm
cancer.
sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I mean, that means a lot to me, but it's just like I still am not, and I think it's because when these things happened, I just shut my mind off from it, right? And I just try to distance myself from the subject.
Right.
I don't really understand the different stages. Like, why is there 4? Is there 5? Is the first one the most detrimental one? So can you speak a little bit to
Yeah,
that?
sure.
The different stages, and I also want you to speak to the surgery, right?
Yeah.
So there's a possibility to just get a surgery and get it removed. We can start with the stages first.
Okay,
I don't
we'll start
wanna
with the stages.
Get overwhelmed, but
So stages actually start at 0.
okay.
Yeah, so stage 0 is that there's a presence, maybe there's cancer cells. I'm not a doctor, so just from what I know, cancer cells, there's a possibility for cancer. So some of them, it could be just a super, super small tumor. And typically on each stage, there's a stage, like let's say there's a stage 1A and there's a stage 1B. Okay, so stage 0 is the smallest amount of cancer. Stage 4 is the most amount of cancer. So there is no stage 5. So it's stage 0, AB, stage 1, AB, stage 2, AB, stage 3, AB. Typically with stage 3 and stage 4, has spread to multiple areas. So with stage 4 being the worst. Now, a lot of times people are diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and they can't be treated. So they'll go into a hospital and a hospital will say, okay, well, you have stage 4 cancer and there's nothing we can do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, there's also people that have cancer that are terminal. They're considered terminal. Like I have a friend, a really good friend. She is terminal. She's like 38. She has 2 kids. Beautiful, strong as hell. She's super buff. I make her flex every time I see her.
That's awesome.
But she's terminal. But her tumor so she'll always have cancer in her body, but her tumor markers haven't grown. So she's in remission. So, I mean, there's all these other things. Now, with stage 4, which is what I had, they were able to treat me. Like I said, they gave me a 25% chance of survival. But at any point that could have gone the other way, right? Stage 4 used to be a death sentence. They used to say, okay, well, if you have stage 4 cancer, there's no way you're going to live. But, thank goodness for cancer research that was done before I was diagnosed, because like I said, had I been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 15, 20 years earlier, then I would have just passed away because people didn't know how to treat stage 4 cancer.
That's so scary.
Yeah.
Wow. So I don't want to say what a perfect timeline for that to happen, but
Right.
In comparison to the alternative, that's a great timing. So is that something that's improved? Because this was in 2006, right?
Correct.
Is that something that's improved even more since then?
Yeah, so it's always improving. And I actually work for the American Cancer Society now. And that's like I said, I was a teacher before. And then I left teaching, which I loved, to go work for an organization because I felt like my story had purpose and I needed to share it. So I went to work for an organization that I thought was doing the most in the cancer space, and that was the American Cancer Society. And the American Cancer Society, which is one of the reasons why I picked to go work there, is the #1 funder of cancer research. So nobody gives more to cancer research than the American Cancer Society, only second to the federal government.
That's beautiful.
So you hear all these other nonprofits that are doing all this stuff, and yes, they're doing cancer research, but they're not doing it better than the American Cancer Society. And that's one of the things that we continue to push at the American Cancer Society. So research that happens now, by the time it gets through clinical trials, things like that, goes through the FDA, it's like 20 years later, right?
Right.
So research that was was done in 2006, we're now starting to see some of those benefits of those, and some of these patients are starting to, survive or use. Like immunotherapy was one that came out in 2006 that was only available for clinical trials, wasn't, for typical medical use, but now you go into a hospital and they use immunotherapy all the time.
Right. So that turnaround time, though, is pretty long for all of these trials, right?
Right.
That's kind of scary.
It's scary, but that's, that's the process. People, you want to make sure that you're safe. It's just like the COVID vaccine that came out, right? And they were pushing it, and everybody's like nervous because they were like, oh no, this is faster than anything else. It's because, they didn't go through that process like some of this cancer research has done. So. Yeah.
So with that being said, can you tell us a little bit about how we would donate to that, and what your participation with that is? I mean, if people want to volunteer, if people want to help. Just obviously, if it's the number one organization after the federal government,
right, we
want to be able to contribute to that cause as well. Can you speak to that and kind of just educate the audience a little bit?
I'll tell you a little bit about the American Cancer Society. It's one of my favorite topics. Like I said, most of the money goes to cancer research, and like I said, it's they are the number one funder of cancer research than any other nonprofit in the nation, actually in the world. But something that the people don't know that we do is that the American Cancer Society not only donates to research, but they also have a number of programs and patient services that are good for cancer survivors. So one of the things that we like to talk about is that the American Cancer Society provides free transportation to and from treatment. So like if you're diagnosed with cancer and you need to get a ride to the doctor's office, the American Cancer Society can provide a free ride for you. So they'll pick you up from your house, take you to the doctor's office, and take you back. Now, the reason that's so important is when I was going through treatment, I couldn't drive.
Right.
I was getting chemo and radiation at the same time. My radiation appointments were every day, Monday through Friday, for 5.5 weeks. And I had to drive all the way from my house in Old Town Scottsdale all the way up to Mayo, which is a 30-minute drive. So thankfully for me, I have a large family. Like I said, I have 3 sisters. My grandparents are still here. So they were able to drive me to and from the doctor's appointments. Not a lot of people have that.
Because that option wasn't available at that time.
No, they just did it. They did it because they live here. But like if you are living in another state, and you don't have a large family network, and you can't get somebody to drive you to your doctor's appointments, the American Cancer Society will do it.
And so that's what I was saying. How long has that been implemented? When you had to drive, that option wasn't available.
No, it was available.
Oh, it was. Okay.
But I just didn't need it, right?
Got it. Because you had your family members.
Right. So it's been a while. It's been something that's been around for a long time. Another thing that we do, let's say I needed to travel out of the state for cancer treatment. A lot of people, before we had an MD Anderson here, people were traveling to Houston MD Anderson and getting treatment there. Now, if I needed to stay there in Houston and get treatment, it's a lot of money in hotels, right? Hotel bills, Airbnbs even. The American Cancer Society actually provides free lodging for people. So we have these things called Hope Lodges across the nation.
Beautiful.
And they're like essentially mini hotels, typically about 20 or 30 rooms, depending on which state you're in. And you and your partner can stay there in these hotels for free while you're getting your treatment. So it's kind of cool. Something else that I like to talk about is our 1-800 number. We have a number that is available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, where you speak to a live person, and it's available in over 37 different languages.
Oh, wow.
Right. So somebody can call, and we have an oncology nurse on staff, and they can ask questions, they can get information. It doesn't have to be that person that's going through cancer. It can be a friend or a family member, or sometimes, like I have friends that were survivors that needed somebody to talk to in the middle of the night, and so they would call them up and just say, hey, I'm just having a hard time. Do you mind talking to me? So it's something cool that we offer. And that number is 1-800-227-2345. And if you were interested in getting involved in the American Cancer Society, you can find us at cancer.org, or you can reach out to me on social media. I'm happy to connect in any way.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll put all this information in the description box. We'll put your social media in there too, because those are huge tools. And I think cancer is such an overwhelming subject that the last thing you think about is mental health, right?
Right.
Like there's a big focus on mental health now, but you think cancer, that's not like at the forefront of my mind.
It's a lot of PTSD.
Yeah.
And that's something that we talk about now is survivors aren't getting enough attention. People that have been out of treatment for long periods of time. You see all these support groups for all these people going through treatment. And they absolutely need it. But the survivors are we just feel like we're kind of out here on our own. but thankfully with social media, we're able to connect with other survivors and create our own little groups. And I reach out to a lot of survivors. I get connected with a lot of survivors on social media. So chat with them through things, cancer scares, like when they're getting ready to go through another scan or another test, right? When you're getting a cancer screening, it's always a little bit of anxiety.
What did those words of encouragement look like for those people? What would you say to somebody, maybe that is too afraid to reach out or, too hesitant? Do you have anything in particular that you would say to them as words of encouragement?
You know what? I like to talk to them, and I like to ask them what their treatment, if they're going through treatment, what their treatment plan is. Now, if they're survivors and they're getting ready to go to a test, it's difficult because it depends on who that person is. But a lot of times I just tell them, like, listen, try to take your mind off of it. Try to keep yourself busy. When you get in, like, the day of the appointment, the 24 hours of the appointment, there's nothing you can do, right? All you can do is go in and get scanned and wait for the results. Now, hospitals are really, really good nowadays as they try to get you those results, like, within those 24 hours. Typically, you would have to wait 3-4 days, maybe even 2 weeks to get your test results back.
I can imagine that anxiety.
Right. So, just trying to keep them busy, trying to keep their minds off of things. I like to encourage yoga, meditation, stuff like that, because it helps everyone in anything that they're doing.
Yeah, those are definitely huge tools. So I want to shift the focus a little bit back to you. I know it's important to give these people these resources, but it is you that we have on that organization. So how did that, affect your day-to-day life? It seems like you have a really tough personality. You're a nice person. You're not scary or anything, but you seem like, you're a tough woman, and you have the whole Wonder Woman ordeal. Can you speak a little bit about that and how it's affected your daily life?
Yeah, you know what? And I'm gonna go back to the story a little, because I know I left a little bit of part out, the end of my journey, and then we can kind of talk about why that became Wonder Woman.
Beautiful.
So I was going through chemo and radiation, and when you're going through those treatments, your immune system is shut down, basically, right? Because they're killing all the cells in your body, so your body can't fight anything off. After my first round of chemo, it was getting ready to be my 1-year anniversary with my husband. And the doctors told us to not go to Disneyland, even though we wanted to celebrate our 1-year anniversary. And I'm a big Disneyland fan, so I know that makes me a total nerd, but that's fine. I'm okay with it. So they said, do not go there, but we decided we were going to go anyway. So we get in the car and we drive to LA, and I felt like crap. I felt awful.
Why did they tell you not to go? Just
because your body can't, well, you're tired, your body can't fight everything, and then there's bacteria everywhere, right? You're at Disneyland, you're touching things, and, there's people from all over the place that, could have a cold or the flu or, God knows what. So they're like, this is the worst possible place to go.
Fair enough.
So we go, and because nobody's going to tell us what to do, right?
Right.
So we go, and I remember at that point my hair was falling out, more in handfuls, and it wasn't dramatic for me, but it was more irritating, because if you ever like brush your hair, if you have girlfriends or whatever, and you see that their hair is all over the bathroom, right? It was 10 times worse. So it was like on my pillow and on my hands. It was in the shower, and I remember we were staying at, I believe it was the Hilton in Anaheim, and there was a Target across the street. And I said, okay, it was our 1-year anniversary. It was October 8th, 2006. And I said, you know what? I'm going to need you to go across the street and get some clippers and shave my head, because I'm done with this.
Oh, wow.
So he walked across the street, got some clippers, came back to the Hilton. He laid out newspaper on the floor, and then I sat down on the floor and he shaved my head. And it was very, very traumatic for him. And I hesitate to tell you this, but because it was so traumatic for him, my hair looked like shit. I mean, it was awful. So it was like patchy. I mean, it looked awful. So
there's a ton of pressure on you in that situation. Obviously, it's about.
I'm gonna need him to get it together.
Right. We need you to be strong, but at the same time, like if putting myself in that situation,
right, it's tough.
I give him credit for even going across the street again. Now I probably just had a breakdown right there.
I'm sure you did. So I mean, it was fine. I called my brother-in-law after that, and I asked him when we got back if he could, clean me up a
Is he
little
a barber?
bit. He's not a barber, but he
Okay.
cuts his own hair.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, so we went to Disneyland. We had a great time. He kept asking me if I wanted a wheelchair. I was like, absolutely not. I am not walking around Disneyland in a wheelchair. I mean, going around Disneyland in a wheelchair. So I walked around. I mean, looking back, I probably should have gotten a wheelchair, but we had a good time. And then I came back, and my brother-in-law fixed me up, so I didn't look ridiculous. But then a couple of months went by because I was scheduled for 4 rounds of chemo. I was getting radiation all the time, and after my 3rd round of chemo, I got an infection, and it wasn't from Disneyland, so it wasn't the trip's fault. But I got an infection. My body couldn't fight it off, and I went into the emergency room. And they took me up to a nurse that was at Mayo. Her name was Chi. She still works at Mayo. And she had me before a couple of times going to ER for different things through my cancer journey. And she recognized that I had a fever that wasn't really normal for me. I was throwing up, which I hadn't thrown up. I was really, really nauseous, but I hadn't thrown up. And she encouraged the doctor to give me a blood culture. And in fact, not encouraged, but made the doctor give me a blood culture, which takes 48 hours to get the results back. So she was like, she told the doctor, who the doctor told her, give her Tylenol, send her home.
Okay.
And she was like, no, there's something not right about this. So she kept me there, and she encouraged the blood culture. They gave me the blood culture. They sent me home. The next day I woke up, I felt fine. And I remember I was watching Young and the Restless, so don't judge me. I was watching
Judge-free zone.
I was watching The Young and the Restless, and I was eating apples. I was like, I'm fine, it's fine. And then the hospital called me, and they're like, you have an infection, and we need to get you to the hospital right away. So it wasn't even 48 hours later, and they already knew I had an infection. So it must have been really, really bad. So I felt fine. My husband was going to go get his hair cut, and then I said, go get your haircut because, if we go to the hospital, we're going to be there for 3 days. We've done this before. We're going to be there for 3 days. And so he's literally at the door, and he's getting ready to walk out. And he's like, I just don't feel right about this. So he's like, no, we're going to go right now. So we load up, and I'm, going, I get into the truck, and we head to Mayo. And we get to the hospital. I walk in, and they're like, oh, we have a room ready for you. You got to go up to the 4th floor. So I was like, okay. So I'm walking up, I get to the elevator, and I get into my room. They want me to change in a hospital gown. And I remember I was wearing like velour leggings. I remember this. And I'm wearing gray velour leggings. And I look at the nurse, and I'm like, my heart's starting to hurt. And she goes, okay. She goes, lay down in the bed. And so she goes, we're going to give you an EKG. So she went and got the EKG machine. She puts it on me, and she puts the blood pressure cuff on me. And I remember looking to my left, and my blood pressure was 40/20 before I blacked out.
Oh, wow. And you blacked out there.
I blacked out there. So they did a code, whatever the code is, right?
What are the chances that you made it to there, to black? I mean, another perfect timing.
And I tried to send him to go get a haircut, right? So they did a code, and all these nurses came in. Obviously, this is him telling me what happened. And I guess I seized up, and they flipped me upside down. When you have an infection, your veins get really, really big, and so your blood can't get to your head and heart to keep you alive. So they flip you upside down so that the blood can get to your head and heart and keep you alive.
Wow.
So all these nurses rush in. They start putting things in me, IVs in me, so that they can help push the blood to my head and to my heart to keep me alive. But actually, I went into septic shock, so the infection overtook my blood, and they put me on a ventilator, and they told my family that night that I wouldn't make it through the night. So
you're a fighter.
Yes, and I didn't even know.
Well, it sounds like you knew. You had your mindset the whole time. I mean, it sounds like as much as you could be in control in the situation, you had control all along.
Yeah.
Obviously you're limited to the control that you can have, but
Right.
It seems like you really took your faith into your own hands. I mean, even with going to Disneyland and all these different scenarios and having the mindset that you did, you just really pushed through. So with all of that, how does that transfer? I want to hear about how it's impacted your daily life, because
Yeah.
it seems like you, not only has it impacted you, but then you take that and you impact your students and your, the teams that you coach and so on and so forth. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So that essentially gave me the title. I've always liked Wonder Woman when I was younger. We used to watch the Linda Carter Wonder Woman all the time. But, they started calling me Wonder Woman after that, right? And, it was kind of my theme in my classroom when I went back to teach. I ended up teaching 7th grade, and, there was Wonder Woman things everywhere, and even the students would call me Wonder Woman. But I tried to go back into the classroom, and that's when I realized, I was like, this isn't, as much as I love this, I know that there's another purpose for me in life. My life has now taken me into a different direction. But I started working for the American Cancer Society. But one of the things that I tell people, that's cancer definitely changes you, right? No matter how much you loved yourself before and how much you want to jump back into the life that you had, cancer changes you. And it changed me. I wasn't always as mentally tough as I am now. I don't worry about I'm not afraid to die, which sounds kind of eerie in a sense. But I just, I remember being so close to death and how comfortable it felt. I know that what my everyday is, that I need to fulfill my purpose, whatever that is, right? And right now I believe that my purpose is empowering other survivors to live. Every day I treat as if it could be my last day. I always say yes to the opportunities instead of saying no. I want to stay home and sleep. As amazing as sleep sounds, and I get enough of it, I want to live, and I want to do the most, and I want to spread the joy, right? Because there's a lot of darkness and hate and anger that comes from going through cancer treatment, and I won't let cancer take my sunshine away from me. So
I love that. What an impactful, and I've never said wow so much, right? I'm normally a lot better at this, but I'm just so shocked and thrown off. I'm trying to keep it all together and just, keep my composure. It's hard to say anything else but wow in these scenarios, because your mindset and especially wanting to put that on other people, and helping them through that just really, really blows me away.
And that's something that I use when I'm coaching my basketball teams, right? And they're like, Coach, I'm dying. This drill's killing me. I'm like, I promise you're not dying. And I'm like, if I can get through 6 months of cancer treatment, or if I can get through being on a ventilator, then you can get through this drill. I promise. Right. And and they have nothing to say after that.
Yeah, they're like, well, we're going to go run some more suicides now, because, we have no excuses.
So every year I wait until a pivotal moment to retell my story. Everybody kind of knows that I'm a survivor, and, some of the girls, you have heard the story before, but there's always a pivotal moment in the season where I feel like it's time that they need to hear it, a little bit of a fight back. So I wait for that moment, and we sit them down. Sometimes it's after a loss, sometimes it's after a win. And I sit them down and I tell them the story, and I say, this is what I've been through. And, it's something that I think about as a life skill that I'm teaching them, right? Basketball, fact of the matter is, a lot of these girls aren't going to make it in the WNBA. They're not going to even make it to a Division I school, right? So you're teaching them survival skills on the basketball court. And it's such a small scale in comparison to what I went through, but it keeps that mentality or that mindset in their heads. So.
And I think, that's going to resonate very hard with them, especially when they're able to look at your story and look at the comparison. Like you're saying, the survival skills. How could you not push through, basketball practice, or even taking that and leaving and working on your homework, or failure? It's there's nothing else that you can say to that.
And I'm lucky I get to see some of them. One of the girls that I used to coach, she had a rough life, and she didn't sit down and just take it and say, I was just born with this rough life. She's a nurse now. She has a family, and it's cool to see some of that stuff. And I like to think, although I probably will never know, but I like to think that a little bit of that story has helped her succeed in life.
I definitely think that. And I think that you're somebody who lives that every single day. I follow you, I follow your story. I follow you on Instagram, and you're always going to concerts. Yep. You're always going to festivals. You're at basketball games. I ran into you at the Suns game last year at the playoffs.
It was the UFC fight.
The UFC fight. The UFC fight. You're right. So it's just you're living life to the fullest. And I think for people, when they first encounter cancer or they first get diagnosed with cancer, I think maybe life kind of stops. So I love having somebody like you on here to talk about how you are so happy and you are successful and you are able to continue to move forward and enjoy life to the fullest after battling cancer. So to give people that hope, I think that's a beautiful thing. And
Thank
I kind of
you.
just want to, of course, and I kind of just want to finish off. I want to know what your goals are now, right? So, I know this is in your past. It's defined who you are today.
Correct.
But let's leave the cancer in the past. You're a cancer survivor. You're amazing for that. What are you looking forward to in life moving forward?
So one of the goals that I'm trying to focus on, especially in my career, is right now I feel like cancer doesn't have a big cancer fundraising, cancer awareness doesn't have a big platform here in Arizona, and I want to make it the number one nonprofit cause here in Arizona. A lot of times you hear about, the Heart Association or, Phoenix Children's Hospital is everywhere, Boys and Girls Club, which are all very, very important things, but, I'm a little biased and I want cancer to be the number one cause that people are working toward raising awareness, fundraising for. So that's one of the things that I want professionally. Personally, I know this may be a surprise to you, but I've never traveled to Europe, right?
Oh, wow.
So that's something that I want to do. I want to go visit Italy. I want to go visit Spain. My great-grandfather is actually originally from Spain. My grandmother is actually from Munich, Germany, and I've never even been to Germany. So something like that would be really, really cool. I want to travel to more places and do things like that. But as far as basketball-wise, as far as a coaching, I'm getting into my retirement years. So hopefully I can retire from that fairly soon. I'm getting old to be doing it. Yeah. I'm pulling up to my 20-year next year, and it's hard. It's having a full-time job and then coaching in the evenings. And the high school girls, they keep me young, but it's a lot of energy.
It's demanding.
Yeah, very demanding. So.
Well, I think those are phenomenal goals. I think you wanting that to be the number one platform should be something that's already taken place. I mean,
right.
Despite the importance of the other foundations and the other platforms, I think we all have somebody that we can think of off the top of our head that was affected by cancer or that we lost from cancer. So
it's 1 in 3 people are diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking to me that it's not already, the number one platform. So I would love to see you accomplish that goal.
Thank you.
I have been to Munich. You're gonna love it.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for you to travel.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're going on 2 decades here of coaching. So
Yep.
I think you've earned your retirement here.
I earned my stripes.
Yeah, absolutely. You can fool me. I still don't believe you. So I don't know about this whole 2 decades of coaching, but we'll take your word for it. But
I'm not shy of saying my age. I just turned 42 last week, and it's a privilege getting older. So I'm happy about that.
Well, happy belated birthday.
Thank
I'm
you
sure
so
everybody
much.
that was watching this podcast was fooled up until now. All right, Lena. Well, thank you so much for being here again. American Dream Podcast, episode 7. I definitely want to have you on in the future. I want to see how your goal manifests itself, how we make this the number one platform. If there's anything that I could do to help, don't ever hesitate to ask and to reach out, okay?
Absolutely. Definitely reach out.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.